This is the 2.0 version of a series of posts that I wrote in the winter of 2009 and 2010. Back then, when I had only just finished a first read of the Harry Potter series, I came across a live journal blog claiming that Dumbledore never cared for Snape. The blog has since become invite-only, probably to protect it from people like me, but it was one of my first lessons in the dynamics of the Harry Potter fandom. I quickly learned from it that a chunk of the fandom considered Dumbledore entirely a master manipulator, who had no concern for the people he, quote, used, including Harry, and of course, Severus Snape. Bloggers stated flatly that the pensieve memories show that Dumbledore didn't love Snape, and that Dumbledore's "you disgust me" may be the harshest thing he says to anyone in the series. Pensieve memories gave me quite a different impression, so let's break this down just a bit. Once upon a time, Dumbledore told Snape on a remote hilltop just after Snape had indicated his willingness to let James and Harry die if someone would just save Lily, "You disgust me." Here's the context. "If she means so much to you," said Dumbledore, "surely Lord Voldemort will spare her. Could you not ask for mercy for the mother in exchange for the son?" I have asked him." "You disgust me," said Dumbledore, and Harry had never heard so much contempt in his voice. Snape seemed to shrink a little. "You do not care, then, about the deaths of her husband and child. They can die, as long as you have what you want." Snape said nothing, but merely looked up at Dumbledore. "Hide them all, then," he croaked. "Keep them, safe. Please." "And what will you give me in return, Severus?" In return?" Snape gaped at Dumbledore, and Harry expected him to protest. But after a long moment, he said, "Anything." I find it a powerful scene, and there's a name for what Dumbledore does here. It's called tough love. Dumbledore speaks harshly to Snape precisely because he respects him enough to tell him the truth. Dumbledore's disgust is based on Snape's behavior, not his person. He does not eternally condemn Snape to the category disgusting. Rather, he merely refuses to coddle Snape. Snape's proposed exchange of the life of the mother for the lives of the father and son is disgusting. By showing his rightful disgust, Dumbledore brings Snape to what an addict might call the first in a series of bottoms. By shining a light into Snape's darkened soul, Dumbledore helps the young Death Eater catch a glimpse of the depths to which he has sunk, making him willing to plead for the lives of Lily's entire family, and even add a please. It's a start. Dumbledore wants more. "And what will you give me in return, Severus?" Why ask for more when everything we know about Dumbledore indicates that he would hardly shirk the responsibility of protecting the Potters, regardless of Snape's response? Because pushing Snape to make a commitment affords the Death Eater an opportunity to truly turn his life around, to change, to repent, to make restitution, to be redeemed. Just as Dumbledore turned his own life around at about the same age. And the prodding works. It is the barest of beginnings, but when Snape says he'll do anything, it truly marks the difference between almost certain damnation and the possibility of redemption. Rather than showing coldness or lack of care, Dumbledore's rough prodding actually shows the depth of his concern for Snape's soul. Our blogger seems to understand this in part. She goes on to write, "I had assumed that Dumbledore loves Snape, the man whom he utterly trusted and mentored away from a damned life, and guided through the trickiest of double agencies. But then she adds, how fascinating to learn that this was wrong, and that Dumbledore saw Snape only as an unusually valuable indentured servant. Let's unpack this term a bit and look at how indentured servitude played out historically. Accepting indentured servitude is how many propertyless men and women gained transport to the North American colonies, where their fortunes could perhaps eventually change for the better. The catch is that indentured servitude bound the servant to a master-slave relationship for the period of the contract. It was common practice, in fact, for indentured servants to be sold at auction on their arrival in the colonies. During the period of the contract, the indentured servant could be beaten and even chased down as a runaway, as we see from these old newspaper notices offering rewards for the return of runaway indentured servants. For example, in the upper left-hand notice, Basil Brooke first describes his servant Patrick Smith, and then concludes, "Whoever shall secure the said Patrick Smith or convey him to the subscriber shall receive 10 shillings, besides what the law allows, paid by Basil Brooke." Likewise, in the upper right-hand notice, Andrew Beale concluded, "Whoever apprehends the said servant and brings him to the subscriber shall receive 4 pistols reward if taken within 40 miles from home. If taken at a greater distance, 5 pistols reward, and reasonable charge paid by Andrew Beale." Note that abducting and transporting a runaway servant back to his master is perfectly legal and even sanctioned under the system of indentured servitude. One key difference between indentured servitude and chattel slavery is that the period of slavery for the indentured servant would end when the contract ended, typically after 7 years. Chattel slavery, on the other hand, relegated freedom entirely to the whims of the slaveholder or the initiative and luck of the person enslaved. Though Dumbledore admittedly asked a great deal of Snape, I see no master-slave relationship between them. Snape did not have to go on staff at Hogwarts. He did not have to work so hard to protect Lily's son. He did not have to spy for Dumbledore. He did not have to work to redeem himself. He always had a choice. Snape was not a house elf and not under some magical bond enslaving him to Dumbledore. Likewise, Dumbledore had no legal authority to chase Snape down or offer someone hunting bounties a reward for his return. Snape could have slithered away into the darkness, and Dumbledore would never have forced him to return to the light. That much is evident from their conversation during the Yule Ball, when Snape tells Dumbledore that the dark mark is growing stronger, and Karkaroff plans to flee. Dumbledore asks Snape if he too is tempted to flee, indicating clearly that he has no intention of forcing Snape to remain if Snape wishes to save himself. But Snape is not such a coward. And he is no indentured servant either. He voluntarily works toward redeeming himself under the guidance of a very tough spiritual mentor, who gives him the opportunity to make free moral choices. And Dumbledore is uniquely qualified for this role. He knows more about the lure of the dark arts than Severus Snape can possibly imagine.